I'm here at my radio bench, hand bench, repair bench, and I want to show you to change things up a little bit. We've been playing with the new radio flyer and going to car shows and things like that, so now we're going to change things up a little bit. I'd like to show you a radio I've been working on for a friend of mine, and figure I'd show you a little bit about, because there's some special things about it that I think I'd share with everybody. Alrighty, here's the radio that we're working on right now. This is a Firestone Air Chief, model S7425. And you can see it's very, very Art Deco looking. The radio is on my bench right now. It's not in the chassis. There's a story behind this radio. A couple of times a year, the New Jersey Antique Radio Club, they have a repair clinic. And sometimes they're open to the public, sometimes they're just there for the members, and this, I believe, was a members only clinic, and I happened to go there to kind of, they call these people experts. I'm not an expert. I'm just good at working on these things. But anyway, I just went over there, and one of the guys in the club, his name is Bob, and he came up to me, and he had 4 radios, and including the Firestone. The thing is, every one of these radios was a unique radio, and what was unique about them is we call these, in the club, we call these radios curtain burners, because the radios, when they were new, they were typically inexpensive and cheaply made, and the filament strings usually didn't add up to 120 volts like the later AA5 sets did. So the reason why they call them curtain burners is that they used a resistance line cord that you would plug into your household outlet, and these things had a tendency to get warm and sometimes even set themselves on fire, thus the name curtain burners. And I neglected to mention too that the resistance line cord was there to basically to fill out the 120 volt, say, or 117 volt filament string, and thus that's why these things sometimes got hot and even got caught on fire. Sometimes they were just very, very dangerous. But you see from this radio, it's actually a pretty cool looking radio. And I said to Bob I would do everything I can to get this thing working in at least some kind of pseudo-safe fashion that he could play this radio. Okay, gang, so here's one of the things I had to work with here. This is the actual schematic for the radio. As you can see, a lot of these types of radios were 4-tube, but this one actually has 5 tubes. And if you can see here, let me zip up the, I'll zoom this in. And there you can see that's the actual filament string right there. So what you have is a 25Z6 rectifier tube, which is this big thing here. This right here is basically the pilot light, and you can see that's also in series with the rest of these. That's a 6-volt pilot light. 25L6, which is your audio output. 6K7 is IF. 6A8, I believe, is the oscillator. 6Q7, is the second detector, ABC, and audio. So obviously, you add all these guys up here, and that doesn't really make 117 volts. Do the math here. Got 74 volts right there. So now if you look over here, right there where it says intermediate frequency, just below that it says denotes line cord. You see that where the number 28 is? That is actually the line cord. Okay, for the radio that came with the radio when it was new. Okay, here's a part of the parts list. If you look at number 28, it says there is this diagram number up here, and then number 28, which we just saw. Power cord dropping resistance 143 ohms plus or minus 10%. So there it is right there, and that's actually a little bit helpful, because it tells you what the actual resistance was that they were actually, here, let's brighten it up, where it would actually drop the or actually consume the power for the filament string right there. Okay, what you see here is the chassis. It's basically done. This radio is done and plain, but let me explain how I had to get there. So You know, I don't have to bore you with the step-by-step what I had to do here, but as I got the radio, it had a regular line cord on it like this. It didn't have the resistor cord. It had a conventional plug on it. And also, I saw this coming up, and there were two wires that were connected to this, and it was just kind of like laying on top of the chassis. I kind of put this bolt in here, and this is a ceramic piece that actually had some threads cut in it. So basically, I traced these two wires back, and it actually went to, it was seriesed out here, alright, where we just showed the line cord. So what I did was, let me show you, let me flip the radio over. I'm sorry about that, I got a little ahead of myself. So what I did was I recapped the entire radio, and here's all the ugly caps. There's electrolytics in there, and wax caps, couplers, bypass, etc. all out and gone. Now we got all nice new ones in here. And then just to initially get the radio running, or seeing if I get the radio running, where when this was still connected, I had 150 ohm. Now this is not 150 ohm, but I just wanted to show you. See, this is a 5-watt ceramic cap. And I put that on there, and then brought this up with a variac and an isolation transformer, and just make sure it was, you know, functional. And after I brought it up, I was getting a couple stations. So I said, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And let me, I got ahead of myself again. This radio is a little bit odd. Let me show you something here. On this part of the schematic, this guy right here, alright, here's the 688, and it's your first detector and oscillator. It's feeding into the first IF section of the radio, and there's an IF can right below that alligator clip there. That's your first IF. And then you get your 6K7. Now your second IF is here, but the second IF is not a can. It is underneath the chassis. There, that's the second IF coil right there. And then the cap is directly above that, so you could actually adjust it from the top of the chassis. Well, one side of this was not working, and what I learned was the little wires coming out of this coil were non-existent on one side. So what I did was I kind of took an old IF coil. This is about 26 ohms. I put that in there, soldered it onto these pins where this coil went, did a little adjusting. There's a slug in there. I adjusted the slug, and then the radio woke up. Then I was able to get a couple stations. So I already had to do some repairs to the second IF just to get this thing to play. Alright, so there's the chassis, all nice new caps. And I brought it up with the variac, and I was able to make it play, but then I had it playing for a little while, and then it kind of whacked that 100. So my fix was to add that. And what that is a ballast resistor. That's a K55B ballast resistor. Now what a ballast resistor does is just basically a big coil inside of it, and there's pins on the bottom with various, depending on which pins you use, this thing has actually different resistances on them. So off of one set of pins on here was right around 154 ohms, which is more than what was on the schematic. And right there, to see, that's 140, well, it's not here, but it would, in the list, here, I can go back up here now. See that, 143 ohms? So this is significantly more. But when I started checking the filaments on these, it wasn't so bad. Like, for example, the 25L6 was about 23.9 volts. It made the tubes work. The 6-volt tubes, for example, like the 6A8 and the 6Q7 and the 6K7, are around 5.7, 5.8 volts. It was enough to make the tubes glow and function. So I left this in here, and I actually called Bob and asked him if I could do this modification. Now you can see it's hanging off the chassis right there. Well, I put it there because, first of all, I wanted to have it in an area because I knew this was going to get very, very, very hot. It's a very Art Deco radio, and I didn't want to take a chance of damaging the plastic or even the paint outside the plastic. So I kind of made it like this. So it's away from, at least away from the radio and away from wires, and it's far enough away from the inside of the cabinet. I think it'll dissipate the heat okay. But there's just there was just nowhere else to put that. Okay, here's the back of the radio with the radio back in the chassis, and here's where I mounted the ballast tube. Now you can see this is a rounded off area of the radio, and there's a lot of clearance here, but you're going to need that because this ballast tube is going to get pretty darn warm, if not hot. As ballast tubes do. But this can at least now be played safely. But I would not, let's just say I would, if this were my radio, it's not, but if it were my radio, I would probably keep an eye on it, or at least not leave it unattended while it was playing. But now it's a player, and I think that Bob will like it. There's an awful lot of work I had to do to this thing to make it work. So remember, don't throw those radios out, because you can make them good and make them play, unless they're absolute junk. So hey, thanks for stopping by. See ya. Bye.
You know, about 1 out of every 4 to 1 out of every 5 jobs created.
But the procedure of it happens to them when they're caught. It
leaves scar tissue. Late tonight, night in the low in the 60s.
Big change for tomorrow. It's going to be dry and sunny and warm, not as humid. The high between 80 and 85. Thursday and Friday mainly sunny, but again, late thunderstorms possible both those days with a high into the 80s.
Right now it's partly cloudy, humid, and 80 degrees in New York.
WCBS News Time, 3:10.
When you're not well, the more quickly you can visit a physician